They say the land out here doesn't change, not the soil, not the silence. But I know better. Some things shift in ways no eyes can track. Like the way a glance lingers too long. Or how a prayer feels heavier after nightfall. It was my third summer in Lancaster County, working under the blistering July sun, baling hay and pretending the quiet didn't bother me. The Amish family that took me in was kind, in their way, firm, distant, but not unwelcoming. They called me English even though I was born just 2 towns over. To them, I was all denim, dirt, and too much looking around. Then there was Eli. He was 19, maybe 20. Hard to say, he never told me and I never asked. His skin was always sun-warmed and clean. His voice, when he spoke, was the kind that made you lean in, even if he only said something like, "Pass the oil." He'd work in silence for hours, and yet I heard everything. The way his breath hitched when our hands grazed. How his eyes never stayed on me too long, but never quite looked away. His family saw him as obedient, the eldest son, destined to inherit his father's land and keep their world stitched together with plainness and prayer. But I saw the slivers, the gaps between what he was and what he wanted. I saw them in the barn. That barn. I swear I still smell the dust and hay every time I close my eyes. Broad beams stretched to the sky like arms in surrender, streaks of sunlight slipping through the slats in golden shafts that danced in the heat. There was something sacred about that space, or maybe sacrilegious. Sometimes I couldn't tell. The days followed a rhythm, sunrise chores, silent meals, evening shadows. But that morning felt different. The air hung heavier, like the whole farm was holding its breath. At breakfast, Eli didn't sit next to his father. He stood, stone still, until his mother placed a plate down. His hands trembled, just barely. No one else noticed, but I did. I always noticed him. Later, as I loaded sacks of grain into the back of the wagon, I saw it again, that pause. He stood in the barn doorway, not moving, just staring at me. His shirt clung to him, damp with sweat. His lips parted as if to say something, then closed. And that's when I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard in 3 months on this farm. A low, guttural moan, human, but not right. Coming from the far end of the barn. Behind the hay bales stacked higher than a man. I turned, startled. Eli didn't move. He just watched me. Was someone else there? Had he brought someone in? Or worse, had someone found out? Something had shifted. And I hadn't yet decided whether I should follow the sound or ignore it. But I knew one thing for sure. After that morning, nothing on this farm, especially between Eli and me, would ever be the same again. The sound never came again. Not that morning, not the next. Still, something had shifted. I could feel it in Eli's posture, stiffer, more cautious. As if he was fighting something invisible and losing. For the next few days, we moved through routine like dancers who'd forgotten the choreography. The others didn't notice. Amish life doesn't lend itself to noticing much outside of chores and scripture. But I did. I saw how Eli lingered longer than usual in the barn after sundown. How he'd leave his shirt off a little too long in the heat, knowing, maybe hoping, I'd look. I noticed how his silence thickened around me, not from indifference but from pressure, like a rope pulled too tight across his chest. And maybe I was just as guilty. Each evening, after supper, I'd walk the fence line with a pitchfork I didn't need. Just to catch a glimpse of him stacking tools in the shed. Just to watch the way his hands moved, rough, strong, deliberate. I'd tell myself I wasn't waiting for anything. But I was. The farm's routine had a rhythm, and that rhythm had rules. But desire doesn't play fair with rules. It erodes them, bit by bit, like water carving valleys into stone. One night, after a storm rolled through and soaked the land in that clean, electric scent, I caught him under the eaves of the barn. He was barefoot, shirtless, staring at the lightning bugs. His skin gleamed from the rain. He didn't speak. Neither did I. I just stood there, breathing in the night and the smell of wet wood and sweat. There was a silence between us, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed. Then, without looking at me, he whispered, "They found my brother." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Dead. In the woods." I waited for more. It didn't come. Was it an accident? He didn't answer. Just turned his face toward the dark fields. They said it was. But he'd run off during Rumspringa. Didn't come back. They called him a disgrace. The pause. He liked boys. My heart pounded, sudden and loud. That was the first time he'd said anything even close to it. It felt like a wound opened in the moonlight. You don't have to, I started. I know. He cut me off, voice strained. But you needed to hear it. I did. And yet, I didn't know what to say. What could I say when I wasn't even sure what I was doing here? Do you miss him? I finally asked. Eli's jaw clenched. I barely knew him. He was 5 years older. Quite like me. He paused again. But I think I understand him now. His eyes flicked toward me. Just for a second. Then he was gone, slipping back into the barn like he hadn't said a word. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the attic room they gave me, staring at the beams overhead. The rain had stopped, but the air felt charged. Like something was waiting to break. Over the next week, things unraveled in quiet ways. Eli started showing up at odd hours, coming into the fields early, lingering after dark. Once, I caught him watching me bathe in the creek. He didn't hide. He just stood at a distance, eyes like storms. I didn't cover myself. I didn't turn away. What did that make me? Complicit? Curious? Or just starving for something I couldn't name? Then came the Sunday gathering. Once a month, the neighboring families came together for food and prayer. Wooden benches arranged under the trees. Women in bonnets. Men in black suspenders. Boys keeping their eyes low. I tried to blend in, polite nods, quiet hands, but I was the outsider. Always would be. Eli avoided me the entire day. Not even a glance. As if he'd erased the memory of every look, every charged silence. But I felt it building in him. Whatever it was, it wanted out. I was walking past the cornfield toward the barn that afternoon when I heard it again. That sound. Not a moan this time. A sharp snap. Like wood splitting. Then footsteps. Running. I froze. Then came Eli, emerging from the side of the barn, breath ragged, his eyes wild. I stepped forward. What happened? He didn't answer. Just grabbed my arm, hard, and pulled me into the shadows behind the stable wall. His breath was hot on my neck. I saw them, he whispered. Duh and the elders. They were burning something. Burning what? He didn't answer. Then his hands were on my chest, pushing me back against the barn wall. I can't keep doing this, he said. Doing what? He was trembling. Wanting this. Wanting you. There was. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. But his body was close enough to feel. My heart thundered in my ears. Eli. You don't know what they'd do to me, he said. To you if they found out. And I didn't. But I could guess. Then he was gone again, just like that. Disappeared into the cornrows like a ghost swallowed by the field. That night, I found something behind the barn. Tucked beneath a loose floorboard. A box. Inside it, a worn paperback book, Giovanni's Room. A rusted lighter. And a photograph. 2 boys. One was Eli. The other looked like him, but older. His brother. They were holding hands. Suddenly I understood. The accident. The silence. The burning. They weren't just mourning. They were erasing. Erasing him. Erasing them. I didn't sleep that night either. I lay awake wondering if Eli had put the box there for me to find, or if I'd just stumbled into a grave he'd buried too close to the surface. And worse, what if they knew he hadn't buried it deep enough? The barn creaked in the wind. Somewhere below, the floorboard shifted. Had Eli come back? Or was someone else moving through the dark? I got up, heart pounding, and reached for the box again. But it was gone. The box was gone. Not moved. Not hidden better. Gone. That kind of disappearance doesn't happen by accident. I didn't see Eli at breakfast the next morning. His mother claimed he'd gone to fetch water from the well on the far edge of the property. I knew better. Eli hated that well. Said it smelled like iron and old regrets. I spent the day in a blur, picking weeds, hauling feed, pretending my hands weren't shaking. I kept glancing toward the barn, half hoping to see his silhouette by the door. But it remained empty. By sunset, the sky turned the color of split peaches and smoke. The whole world was too quiet. Even the cows were still. I didn't wait for supper. I walked to the barn alone, boots crunching gravel like breaking bones. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of hay and something else, smoke. Faint but real. I followed it to the corner where the floorboard had once been loose. Now it was nailed shut. Freshly. I stared at it. My pulse thundered. Then, a voice behind me, low, rough, like it had been dragged through gravel. I had to. I turned. Eli stood in the doorway, face half lit by the last light of day. Sweat clung to his collarbone, and there was dirt under his fingernails. "You burned it," I said, even though I already knew. He nodded once. "They found it." "Your father?" Eli didn't answer. He stepped closer. They didn't say anything. Just left it by my bed. The book. The picture. Like a warning. He ran a hand through his hair. "They didn't yell. Didn't hit me. That would have been easier." "What did they do?" He looked at me then. Eyes like glass ready to crack. "They prayed. For hours. While I knelt in front of them. I felt something inside me curl, then break." "You didn't have to burn it." "Yes, I did," he said. "You don't understand what they're capable of." He was right. I didn't. Not fully. I stepped forward, closing the space between us. "And what are you capable of?" His jaw clenched. "I don't know anymore," he whispered. Then his hand reached up, not to touch me, but to hover, shaking just an inch from my chest. Like he didn't trust himself to make contact. I didn't move. I let him choose. His fingertips finally grazed the base of my throat. And that was all it took. The dam broke. He shoved me back, not in anger, but desperation, into the support beam, his lips crashing against mine like thunder after lightning. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was hungry. His hands dug into my hips like he was afraid I'd vanish. I kissed him back, my hands tangled in the back of his shirt, pulling him closer, closer until we weren't two bodies anymore, just one long tremble in the dark. The barn creaked around us. Dust floated through the slats like golden ghosts. A horse snorted from a nearby stall, but neither of us flinched. We were beyond being watched. Or maybe we wanted to be watched. He pulled back for a breath. His eyes searched mine. "I shouldn't want this," he said, voice raw. "I know," I said, my own voice barely holding. "But I do," he said. "I do too." He leaned his forehead against mine, panting. Then he dropped to his knees. Not in worship. Not in shame. In surrender. His hands found my waist again, and for a long, burning moment, there was no outside world. No Amish rules. No burning boxes. No dead brothers. Just skin and longing and everything we hadn't said, poured into every grasp, every breathless whisper. I touched his hair, thick, damp with sweat and fear, and thought, this can't last. This won't last. But I didn't stop. When it was over, he didn't rise right away. He stayed there, his cheek pressed to my stomach like he wanted to disappear into me. Then, softly, "They're going to send me away." I froze. "When?" "I don't know." So, might have said I'd be apprenticing with Uncle Levi in Indiana. No warning. No discussion. Just exile. I ran a hand down his back. "And you're just going to go?" He pulled back, stood up, stared at the wall like he couldn't look at me anymore. "What choice do I have?" "You have a lot of choices," I snapped. "You just don't want to pick the one that costs something." He flinched like I'd slapped him. I stepped back, ashamed. "I'm sorry. That's not fair." "No," he said quietly. "It is." He turned away, hands braced on the stable gate, shoulders tight with held-in sobs. "I'm scared," he whispered. And for the first time, he sounded young. Not the hard, quiet man I thought I'd known. Just a boy, breaking under centuries of rules. I walked up behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist, rested my chin on his shoulder. "So am I," I said. We stood there in silence, listening to the night grow thicker around us. A floorboard creaked behind us. Not from us. We turned. But there was no one. Just the barn door, ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. Had someone seen? Had someone heard? I felt Eli stiffen. His hand found mine and squeezed. Then he let go. "I have to go," he said. I didn't ask where. Because I already knew. The next day was too bright. Too loud. Even the bird song felt like an accusation. Eli was gone before sunrise. His mother said he'd been sent to town to deliver eggs. She said it too quickly, her eyes flicking to mine like she wasn't sure if she should be lying. Or if I already knew the truth. I went about my chores like a ghost, moving but not living. The barn felt different now. Like it knew. Like the walls were holding their breath, waiting to be asked what they'd seen. I avoided it. That afternoon, I sat by the creek where I usually bathed, legs in the cold water, trying to wash the night off my skin. The trees rustled softly, their shadows long and narrow. I kept thinking about the way his lips had trembled. How he held me like a man who thought he'd never get the chance again. How quickly he let go. And how the barn door had been open. Wide enough for someone to see. Had they? Or had we imagined the creek? That night at dinner, no one spoke to me. Not even the younger kids, who usually asked me about my phone or my life in the English world. The silence was thick and sharp and targeted. When I cleared my plate, the father finally spoke. "We believe in forgiveness here," he said without looking up. My throat tightened. "Yes, sir. But we also believe in truth." I nodded slowly. "Truth can be painful," he added, pushing back from the table. "But pain teaches." I didn't ask what he meant. Because I already knew. Later that night, I slipped out of the attic and crossed the fields barefoot, moving fast, not caring if anyone saw. I had to see Eli. Had to understand what was happening. But his bed was empty. I found his mother outside the barn, kneeling with a pail of water and scrubbing something from the wooden frame. She didn't look up. "Where is he?" I asked. Still scrubbing. Her knuckles were red. The water in the bucket was already brown. "Gone," she said flatly. "Gone where?" "To be corrected." I stepped closer. "By who?" She stopped scrubbing. Her hands stilled in the water. "You brought something here," she said, voice trembling. "You stirred it up. In him." She turned, and for the first time I saw it, real sorrow, not blame, in her eyes. "He was trying to be good," she whispered. "We all were." I wanted to scream. That I didn't corrupt him. That he'd come to me. That we didn't choose this, it chose us. But I said nothing. Because there was no version of this conversation where I came out clean. I returned to the attic, sat on the floor, and stared out the window. His horse was still in the stable. He hadn't taken it. Had someone taken him? The barn loomed in the distance, half swallowed by moonlight. I couldn't sleep. I needed to know. So I went back. The barn door creaked as I pushed it open, just like it had before. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been for a July night. The tools were where we'd left them. The ladder still leaned against the upper loft. The scent of sweat and hay still clung to the beams. And something else. Burned wood. Not from the box. From something more recent. I followed the scent to the back, near the loose floorboard, now hammered down with thick, black nails. And that's when I saw it. Carved into the wall, barely visible unless you caught the light just right. "Forgive me." It was scratched, raw and jagged, like it had been done in haste. In desperation. Was it a confession? A goodbye? Or a warning? I stood there, staring until the barn began to feel too small. Like the air was pressing in. Then I heard it again. A sound. But muffled. Not a creak. A voice. A whimper. Coming from beneath the floorboards. My blood ran cold. I stepped back. Stumbled, nearly fell. Was I imagining it? Or had they hidden something down there? Someone? I dropped to my knees, ear pressed to the wood. Silence. Then faintly, my name. A whisper. And then, nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the barn, waiting for another sound. Another flicker of movement. But there was nothing. Just the distant shuffle of cows, the creak of trees shifting under the weight of silence. By morning, Eli's horse was gone. So was the carving on the barn wall. Someone had sanded it away. cleaned it, erased it, like he'd never been here. Breakfast was quieter than usual. The children avoided my eyes. The father offered a prayer that sounded more like a warning than a blessing. When I rose from the table, his voice followed me. "You'll be leaving at the end of the week." I turned slowly. "We agreed on a month." He folded his hands. "And now I've unagreed." I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. There was no winning here. They wanted me gone. As if my absence could scrub the memory of what had happened. As if it could undo the night in the barn, the whispers, the hunger, the truth. Eli was nowhere. His clothes were gone from the line. His boots. The only thing left was a thin leather strap that had once hung from his neck, now tossed in the dirt by the back porch, like trash. I picked it up and held it for a long time. That night, I snuck out again. I needed closure. Proof that I hadn't imagined it all. That I hadn't dreamed his body against mine, the way his hands had trembled, the way he'd whispered my name like it hurt. The barn door opened without a sound. Inside, the hay was disturbed, as if someone had been dragged across it. The floorboard, still nailed shut. I crouched beside it, fingertips brushing the edges. Smooth. No voices now. No whimpering. No name. But there, wedged between the wood and a rusted nail, I found it. A note. Folded. Wet. Smudged. One word, scrawled in haste. Run. I stood there for a long time, holding that word like it might split open and scream. Had Eli written it? Had someone else? Run from what? From them? From myself? I stuffed the note into my pocket and left the barn. But I didn't go back to the attic. I kept walking. Through the field. Past the fence. Toward the road I'd first arrived on, wide and long and cracked with old memories. I didn't stop. Not even when I heard a voice behind me. A whisper, maybe. Or wind. My name. Finn. But when I turned, no one. Just fog curling low over the grass. And the faint, rhythmic sound of something being hammered in the distance. Nails. Like they were sealing something shut. Something still alive. I started running. Not toward safety. But toward truth. Even if it meant I wouldn't like what I found. Even if it meant I'd never see him again. But a part of me, deep and aching, already knew. I would. And when I did, he wouldn't be the same. He was Amish, pure and quiet, but sinned heavily with me in the barn's true gay story, LGBTQ. I came to Lancaster to disappear. That was the point, wasn't it? No phones. No noise. Just sky and wheat and the illusion of starting over. My therapist called it a reset. I called it running. Either way, the Amish family who agreed to host me didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not just the absence of engines or buzzing screens, but a deeper silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums and forces you to hear your own thoughts. Loud and unfiltered. The farm sat on 50 acres of flat land, framed by cornfields and dense tree lines that seemed to whisper when the wind blew. The house was old, whitewashed, its porch sagging slightly on the left. There was a wooden barn set back from the main house, tall and skeletal, with a single lantern hanging by the door. It flickered at night, even when there was no wind. That first evening, I watched it from my attic window, that flame dancing in the dark like it had a mind of its own. I met Eli the next morning. He was their oldest son, tall, impossibly still, with hands that looked like they could crush stone but handled livestock like porcelain. His hair was longer than the others, always tucked behind his ears. He didn't speak to me much at first, just nodded when we passed in the hallway or handed me a bucket during chores. But his silence wasn't empty. It was deliberate. Like he'd learned a long time ago that saying less meant people saw less. He watched me when he thought I wasn't looking. Long, sideways glances that lingered too long. And once, when I bent to grab a rake, I felt it, that gaze, hot and hesitant, trailing the curve of my back like a secret being written in the air. At night, I'd lie awake in the attic, the ceiling fan spinning slow like the hand of a broken clock, and I'd think about him. The way his shirt clung to his spine after a day in the sun. The way his fingers twitched when he was nervous. The faint scar under his chin, like someone had once tried to silence him, and almost succeeded. I didn't come here for this. But desire doesn't ask for permission. It sneaks in through floorboards and brushstrokes and the way someone lingers too long by your side when they don't have to. Still, I told myself it was nothing. Just tension. Projection. A city boy inventing stories out of boredom. Until the night I heard footsteps outside my attic window. Slow. Careful. Then a whisper. Not my name. But his. His own. Over and over, like a confession. Eli. Eli. I stared into the dark for a long time after that. And the next morning he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just handed me the feed bucket and walked toward the barn. But he didn't look back. Not once. Why did that feel like a warning?